Hi, I'm Deanna Cohen. I'm co-founder and CEO of Plastic Pollution Coalition. Thank you for joining our global webinar series, which brings our community together to share the latest information, tips, and resources to help stop the plastic pollution crisis. Welcome today to our January webinar, January 2022. Happy New Year. Flip the script on plastics in Hollywood, rethinking single-use plastics in film and television. A little about us. Plastic Pollution Coalition is a growing global alliance of more than 1,200 organizations, businesses, and thought leaders from 75 countries working to educate, connect, and advocate for a more just, equitable world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impact. So before we get started, we have 4 poll questions, which we'd like to ask our audience to get a better idea of who's joining today. I'm going to share them with you now. We'll do them one at a time, and you have about 15-20 seconds to answer each one. Here we go. Poll question number 1. Where are you joining us from today? Interesting, the majority of folks joining are from North America, but it looks like we've got people on the line from Europe, the Caribbean, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, and also from Australia, New Zealand, or the Pacific Islands. Oh, and the Caribbean, so welcome. Let's go to poll question number 2. Have you had a chance to read the Flip the Script on Plastics in Hollywood report? It looks like about 12% of the folks who have tuned in have read it, and about 88% have not had a chance to read it yet. I hope that you'll read it after this, and we look forward to sharing the highlights and results with you today. Let's go on to poll question number 3. What best describes the industry where you work? That's really interesting, very eclectic group. Lots of people from the entertainment industry, but mainly from the nonprofit space and education, but also corporate and business, research, and other. I wish I knew what other was. How cool. All right, let's go on to question number 4. What best describes your age range? Wow, well, this is a great, very broad range of ages who have tuned in today. So it looks like the majority of us are baby boomers, Gen X, millennials. We've got some Gen Zers on. Thank you for joining. And also people from the silent generation, our elders. Thank you for joining. Okay, great. That takes care of our poll. And without further ado, the topic for our webinar today is Flip the Script on Plastics in Hollywood, rethinking single-use plastics in film and television. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome our panelists. Joining us today, we have actor, director, and producer Yareli Arizmendi, actor, president of SAG-AFTRA, and founder of Cancer Schmancer, Fran Drescher, actor, producer, and director Kyra Sedgwick, and project specialist at the USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center, Dana Weinstein. First, I would like to introduce you all to Dana Weinstein. Dana is a researcher for the Media Impact Project at the University of Southern California's Norman Lear Center. Dana has conducted entertainment media research on a variety of issues, including single-use plastic use, climate change, poverty, health equity, charitable giving, and reproductive rights. Dana will be presenting the findings of the report, Flip the Script, Can Hollywood Help Us Imagine a Future Without Plastic? Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Dana.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. So again, my name is Dana, and I'm going to share some really exciting research we did in partnership with the Plastic Pollution Coalition. So let's get the slides started. Actually, I'll head to the next slide. Okay, so before diving in, I wanted to give you a little background on the center. At the Norman Lear Center, we study how entertainment can change hearts and minds on important issues. So our work is defined essentially by the idea that stories matter. And this is supported by decades of research showing entertainment has the power to change audiences' knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors on a wide variety of social issues. And that's exactly what we do at the Lear Center. We leverage the power of storytelling to study and inspire accurate and authentic entertainment narratives across a number of different topics, ranging from poverty and health equity to immigration and climate change. So diving into the present research, we conducted a content analysis of 51 hours of television from 64 episodes of popular comedy and drama shows to capture the prevalence of single-use plastics in popular scripted entertainment. We also identified all single-use and reusable items that characters interacted with on screen. And we counted multiple single-use plastic items in the background of scenes as what we're calling mass plastic events. So let's get into some key findings from our research. Perhaps this isn't a surprise to anyone, but we found that single-use plastics were highly common on scripted TV. So characters interacted with an average of 28 single-use plastic items per episode. And in addition to this 28, we identified an average of one mass plastic event per episode. So that could be a scene set in a grocery store with hundreds of plastic packaged items in the background, just as an example. We also saw that single-use plastics were particularly abundant in certain TV contexts, including parties, eating takeout scenes, and medical settings. When we did a deeper dive, the predominant theme that came up in depictions of single-use items was the invisibility of disposal. So we saw that 93% of single-use items were not disposed of on screen. And what this does is it ultimately contributes to the false narrative of magically disappearing trash, which is basically the idea that plastic items just go away on their own without acknowledging their harm on people and the planet. And even beyond disposal, very few characters acknowledge the existence of plastic waste at all. So only 8 episodes, or 13% of our sample, included any dialogue about plastic waste or related issues like sustainability or reusables. When we specifically looked at item comparisons, we found that single-use plastics far outweighed their reusable counterparts on screen. So for example, we saw that plastic straws were more than 35 times as common as reusable straws, or that single-use beverage bottles were nearly 8 times more common than reusable bottles on TV. There were, however, some notable examples of characters modeling positive reusable behaviors. So for instance, the show Superstore on NBC repeatedly showed major characters drinking from reusable Hydro Flask coffee cups in their break room. And the fact that these were recurring characters is highly noteworthy. Research suggests that people are more likely to engage in the behaviors they see modeled by others, and that includes fictional characters that audiences have come to identify with over time. So based on the findings from our content analysis, we've worked with the coalition to offer some recommendations for content creators and industry folks who are interested in limiting single-use plastics, both on and off screen, and who'd want to encourage audiences to do the same. So we already know that scripted entertainment has the power to model pro-social behaviors. And that's why it's important to have characters use non-plastic reusable items whenever possible, and to even incorporate these choices into character development. So like we saw with Superstore and some other shows in our sample, having characters who exhibit a consistent preference for reusable items is a way to model sustainable behaviors and to take advantage of this unique and influential bond between audiences and beloved characters. We'd also recommend including dialogue and storylines that raise awareness of plastic pollution or alternatives to single-use items. You know, swapping out items or materials alone may be insufficient if we're not also intentionally building out dialogue and story worlds that educate audiences and motivate them to act. So, you know, writers may want to incorporate characters who confront plastic pollution issues in their daily lives, For example, consider a plotline about a family who lives near a plastics incinerator, or a story about a cafe owner who provides reusable to-go containers to their customers. These types of storylines could really drive home the message about the dangers of plastic pollution and the pressing need for alternatives. Of course, we know that it's not always possible to cut out single-use plastics on TV. When plastics items are depicted, we'd suggest highlighting elements of their life cycle, from fossil fuel extraction to manufacturing, distribution, and disposal. As is, showing single-use plastic items without depicting their full life cycle and disposal only contributes to the false narrative that these items just go away on their own. And our final recommendation concerns showing systemic solutions to the crisis in addition to modeling individual behavior change. So one notable thing that we found across a number of different research topics is that dominant media narratives tend to emphasize personal responsibility, whereas the types of narratives that most effectively inspire social change are those that balance both personal stories and structural factors, and then model systemic solutions to those challenges. So perhaps that could mean writing a TV storyline about the power of collective action to fight for corporate accountability and progressive anti-plastics legislation. This could help shift the cultural conversation away from blaming individual consumers and towards holding corporations and systems accountable for their large role in the plastic pollution crisis. So I hope these recommendations have been useful in getting the creative gears turning for how Hollywood can more effectively address plastic pollution issues. Thank you so much for listening. I also wanted to thank the Coalition for supporting this research and to give a special shout out to the team at the Norman Lear Center and to Adam Rogers, who has been my wonderful co-researcher and mentor on this project.
Thank you so much, Dana. Thank you for presenting that. And it's a, I want to go deeper into it. So it's very interesting to have this as a baseline. So it's been terrific to work with you guys. Now I'd like to introduce our other panelists. I'd like to introduce Yareli Arizmendi. Yareli is an award-winning actress, writer, and producer, as well as a social activist. She's best known for her performances as Rosada in Like Water for Chocolate, and as Lila Rodriguez in A Day Without a Mexican, a movie she co-wrote and co-produced. We are delighted to have you here, Yareli.
Thank you. Thank you very much for creating this space and for inviting me into it. And, I am very happy to try to come up with story, knowing the power of story that includes, this idea of what plastic does to our earth. I have to say, on a personal level, I was not clear until about 10 or 12 years ago how incredibly damaging single-use plastic is on a day-to-day basis for everything on earth. I mean, I think that what got me like most riled up was to see the sea, the ocean, and those floating islands. I mean, this is us doing it. You know what I'm saying? It's us. And I thought, I am part of us. So if I'm part of us, I have to be part of the solution. And I'm very happy to hear the information, Dana, and to act according. So well, that's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
I'll come back to you. Thank you.
All right.
Now let me introduce Fran Drescher, best known for her iconic role as Miss Fine in the award-winning series The Nanny. Fran is also the new president of SAG-AFTRA and the founder of Cancer Schmancer and the Cancer Schmancer Movement, a plastic pollution coalition member organization. And we're very honored to have you with us today, Fran.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be included in this. And thank you, Diana, for all that you do, really, and for organizing this today as well. It's true. I'm actually a 21-year cancer survivor. And as a result of that, I started the Cancer Schmancer movement. And the thing that I started to connect the dots to, which makes my organization unique, is that most cancers are directly related to environmental toxins. And I spend a great deal of time trying to educate the public on how our behavior, how our mindless consumerism is hurting ourselves, our families, our pets, as well as the planet, which is one big interconnected living organism. So if you're hurting the planet, ultimately you're hurting yourself. And I think that what we're seeing now with this pandemic is ultimately going to be seen as a symptom of very poor lifestyle that we impose on each other and the planet and all life on it. So we must start connecting the dots in that regard. But I'm also a writer, producer, and as you said, the national president of SAG-AFTRA. So I feel like, as I always have, even as a celebrity, if we don't start taking what we do and applying it to the greater good, we're wasting it, because this whole journey that we're on can't simply be about making money and having success. And unfortunately, the bottom line is ruining everything. And we as human beings are behaving much like a cancer on this planet. We don't want to die, but yet we're destroying our host. And that's exactly the way a cancer functions. Believe me, I know. So I'm very happy to be partnering with you for all of these years, even before I became president of SAG-AFTRA, but now to lock elbows on the first SAG-AFTRA Green Council, because our industry is very unique because we're the major influencers on the planet. And we have a responsibility to put product out there, content out there that normalizes the direction that we need to be going into. Yeah. We had to be taught to not drink and drive. We had to be taught to buckle up for safety. We had to be taught to not litter. And we have to be taught to stop using single-use plastic. And we have to do it now because there's not a moment to waste.
I hear you. Yes. Thank you. So I'll be back. So finally, I'd also like to introduce Kyra Sedgwick. Kyra Sedgwick's role in the smash hit series, The Closer, earned her both an Emmy and a Golden Globe. Film roles include Born on the 4th of July, Singles, Phenomenon, The Game Plan, The Possession, The Edge of 17, among others. She recently starred in Carrie Leiser's comedy, Call Your Mother, for ABC. We're thrilled you could join us, Kyra. Welcome.
Wow. Thank you. Wow. I am just so in awe of the women on this panel. What an extraordinary team we have here. I'm so touched because I feel like so much of my environmental history, experience has been this feeling of real powerlessness. And the only way I can ever feel that I can mitigate that is to try to be part of the solution. And so I want to be part of the solution always on every set I am on by educating, and also when I'm number one on the call sheet, getting them to actually change their behavior, craft service and reducing single-use plastic on sets. When you have power comes responsibility, and I feel grateful to be part of that solution, but also I think taking this kind of research that you guys have done will go very far it will really penetrate people's understanding about, the storytellers and the directors, and mostly the writers and producers understand that we can really make a difference, because as Fran said, we had to be taught, not to drink and drive. We had to be taught. And, part of what we're doing with plastic on screen is what we used to do with smoking cigarettes on screen. And we haven't been doing that for, since I think it was 1965 when they outlawed that. And there's a lot of things that can be done. So I feel grateful to be part of the solution, and so grateful to be here today to learn more. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyra. So we're going to begin the question and answer segment of our panel. If you have any further questions or questions along the way, please put them in the Q&A section. And again, people can upvote them, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. I think we're doing great on time. I'd like to start by asking our panelists, which I feel like some of you've done this in a way already, but to talk about your personal interest, specifically in reducing your plastic footprint, both on personally and professionally, and along those lines, to share if you have an anecdote that you'd like to share about how you've approached it in your work. And let's actually start with Kyra.
Okay. So yes, on the sets that I am, when I'm not a guest player or not don't have a really small part, I feel like I can make more of a difference. I mean, I certainly can speak to people one-on-one when I'm in a smaller, less powerful situation, but and there's really nothing like actually having something on set that you're drinking out of that has nothing to do with anything plastic. And then when they offer you plastic bottles, say, I don't like to be part of that problem. I like to be part of the solution. I only drink this, or I don't drink, plastic water. I mean, I have to say that, there's a way to do it nicely. I've learned from Dana how to do it nicely. But yes, I think that you can bring in professionals to come in and talk to people like craft service and to green your and plastic free your offices, whether it's the writer's room or it's the production office, and even on set. I must confess that I think that COVID has changed things to a degree. Unfortunately, it really breaks my heart. Like, we're getting, rather than, eating in a more communal space, things but there's still stuff to do. There's still things to do about that. And so, and then when, props come your way and they are, a plastic coffee cup or plastic water cup, that you can say, look, that's not going to work for me. We're going to have to come up with another solution, because we all know that what we see on screen and what we see, whether it's the big screen or the small screen, has an impact on us. And so these are the kinds of things that are important to me. I think that you can either be a warning or an example. And I really try to be an example, all the time. And so these are just kind of some of the small things that I get to do as a performer on set in my work life. Right. And then in personal life, it's all about what you buy and don't buy at the grocery store.
I feel like you've shared that with your family too. It seems like your daughter is very interested in it as well.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, your kids, they'll pick up they'll also pick up the environmental depression that you can sometimes, have when you're, but I think that everyone's feeling environmental depression and like this existential crisis. I mean, there isn't that most people understand that climate change is real and that it's our problem and that we're doing it. I think people are feeling powerless as to, change it. So I think that the more that we can implement storylines that actually, I love that idea of, of activism that actually pays off, and communal activism, like on a storyline. I mean, that's something that I feel like writers should just, that could feel so good. And that's a very Norman Lear vibe for me, so, I would love to, and I think that what you guys have done by doing this kind of research is what happened with the Women in Film and Annenberg also, when they did that kind of research about women in the industry and the insane numbers and disparity. And that has really changed the environment, or made everyone very aware. And so I think that this kind of research is really important, and I'm grateful that you guys did it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yareli, what are The same question for you, actually.
The same
So
question as I was listening to Kyra. I mean, I have to agree with everything that she said, and especially I don't find myself in powerful positions often, so that I could, you know, from the top down say none of this on this set. But I do, you know, I think example is one of the most powerful things that we can do, and sort of do it in a, as Kyra said, you have to kind of learn to do it in a nice way, in and maybe bring an extra, you know, bottle that you can share, a funny one, something that's attractive on it, that people will ask you about it. I have to say, personally, the film that I created with my husband, A Day Without a Mexican, has the premise of it guides my life. Meaning, how do you make the invisible visible? You know, because the use of single plastic is completely invisible to most, right? We just do it. So we answered, this was for Latinos, right? How do you make the invisible visible? You take it away. So all of a sudden, if there was none on the set for a day, like if you were to play a prank and say, no, there are no straws, there are no glasses if you don't bring your own, if you don't, you know what I'm saying? Kind of do like some kind of I've brought things to the set, you know, as opposed to ask for them, because I thought that that would be a little bit easier, you know, to put like the something alternative next to the other obvious non-choice, especially for coffee, you know, and it gets people talking. And I think that that's the most effective way to make a real change, you know, to get the talk going and get the action. And you may have to bring the action in yourself.
I like that idea of like a pilot project where you make the invisible visible. I think that's really interesting. Yeah. So, and Fran, same question for you. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was just taking notes as I was hearing these wonderful panelists speak. And Kyra had mentioned, you know, what we buy and what we don't buy. And what people really don't realize is how much power we have as consumers, particularly women, particularly in North America, where we are the largest consumers on the planet. What we buy becomes our vote. What we don't buy becomes our protest. And what we're realizing is that we cannot wait around anymore for our elected officials to change regulation, because they are beholden to deep-pocketed lobbyists who represent petrol companies as well as chemical companies. And they are the puppeteers that are pulling their self-serving strings. So we have to become the mindful consumers that start changing from a groundswell up, because if we don't buy it, they won't make it, because the bottom line is the bottom line. And I often say, if everybody stopped drinking cola today, they'd stop making it tomorrow that quickly, because it doesn't matter who's in the White House or what regulation has been passed. If people aren't buying it, they will simply not make it. So what you're doing is very important, because everybody here has a certain reach to reach the public. And that's the same thing with what we would be doing with, you know, the writing and producing to flip the script. Besides changing productions, because that's very pervasive too. And that's like changing every household in America and around the world. We all have to do it, and each one teach one. But also, what is the essence of, for example, comedy, which is my area of expertise, and that's conflict. And when we're talking about Norman Lear, and we think about something like All in the Family, you could not have a character like Archie Bunker without having the meathead to create the conflict and the counterpoints of view. So you can do a show where you have somebody that represents the mindless consumer who is the masses, but it's our responsibility to also counter that with the character that's more enlightened. And from that comes great comedy and entertainment too. Just like we laughed at Archie Bunker because we heard the other point of view. We understood that character had a very strong presence in All in the Family, but we knew that what he was saying wasn't right because we were able to hear the other point of view and we were able to laugh with the characters as well as at the character. And that's kind of the direction I think we have to go, and what we have to put a fire under all of the people that are in a position to write and produce content.
Right. Well, so we have lots of other amazing questions, so I'm going to take us through them as quickly as I can. How can we influence what goes into film and television when brands are paying so much to productions to be featured? And this is income for studios and productions. Mm-hmm. Anyone want to jump in on that?
I mean, we at Cancer Schmancer are principled in the sense that we won't take money from people that are actually part of the problem. And, there comes a point, and we're kind of at that tipping point, where I think conscious capitalism must take a leadership position. And we have to start looking at everything, including our own portfolios. And what banks are we putting our money into? And are those banks investing in major polluters? It is so deeply pervasive that, everywhere you turn, you have to start re-examining, what are you doing? How are you making your money? Where are you putting your money? How is that money being invested? All of it has to be re-looked at. And yeah, it's, at some point, business has to take responsibility and say, we're just not going to support that. Sorry. That's not going to be easy because capitalism is basically run amok. And when you make money at the cost of all things of true value, you're a sociopath, really. So that's kind of, I think, the area where we really need to start calling people out on what they're doing. It's not enough to be, PepsiCo and putting money into nonprofits when at the same time you're poisoning your customer. It's not enough to be RJ Reynolds and be giving money to nonprofits while at the same time you're poisoning your customer. At some point you have to pick a lane.
Right.
And we're at that point. So it's not going to be easy because most corporations want to show a profit for their shareholders. But
Well, I think
then again, shareholders are us.
Well, Fran, though, sorry to interrupt. I think it's really also, if studios and the industry is making commitments to reduce their carbon footprint and to address climate and all of these things, I think that they need to look at the deals that they're making with product placement and the divisions that they have for things like that, and make sure that those are not in conflict, because at the moment they are in conflict. So, okay, other amazing questions, or did anyone else want to have an answer for that one? No? Okay.
It's going to be a toughie, I think. That's going to be a toughie. I mean, I think what we're talking about really big picture is corporate responsibility, which
That's an oxymoron right there. Exactly.
And thanks
Yeah,
to our
boycott becomes the language
Exactly.
they understand.
Exactly.
Because, they can, if you boycott companies that are hurting the planet and hurting everything on it, they'll get the message loud and clear. At the end of the day, manufacturers really don't want to kill us. They just want to sell us. But they'll sell us anything that we're willing to buy, which right now is anything. Now, we can try and control product placement, but then can we control the commercial breaks?
Yeah. No.
So, yeah, so another very, I think, really great question, it's got me thinking, is how can we make inroads into children's programming and encourage, reuse, refilling, reduction of single-use plastics and et cetera. My monofocus, but, single-use plastics.
Well, I think that would be great. I think that, again, I think that this is something that these younger generations are dealing with even more, even more presently than we are, because we've sort of been in it for a long time. They're like looking at their whole future and thinking, okay, this is what I have to look forward to. So I'm all for it. I don't know anyone in children's television, but I'm in.
Right. Here's another great question. What progress has been made, would you say, to date that you can think of in the entertainment industry when it comes to these kinds of sustainability issues, but in particular, reducing our plastic footprint? Because I've seen some interesting models. So I'll give you an example of one. There's a commercial director who wrote a blog piece for us. He specifically, for all of his commercial shoots, sends out, call sheets and communications in advance, encouraging everybody in the production and the actors to bring their own reusable water bottles with them. And so they give them notice, in advance, and then remind them a couple times to bring them to the set, and then have worked very hard and had me come down and see how they manage their catering to make it as reusable and refillable as possible. And so to move away from all the single-use stuff. Obviously, this was pre-COVID, but we're watching people reinstate this now as we move through this time. So any examples? I feel like I had a chance to see the set of The Closer, what you were doing originally, Kyra, with catering. So what did you do for that? Yeah.
Well, everything was compostable, which is, we can get into the weeds about what exactly that really is. You need to have an open landfill for things to be compostable, but certainly there was that. Everything that was used for catering was compostable. There was no single plastic use bottles. Everyone refilled, everyone got, a flask at the beginning of the season, and then they would fill up. We had big, sparklets, containers all around. And when we were on location, it was just very, very rare that you saw a plastic bottle. And if you did, you recoiled from it as if from a flame, as they say, I think it becomes a culture of your workplace, and then everyone starts to feel like part of that solution, and that can be a really wonderful thing. I think that people in the powerful positions or executive producers, it can be the people that are like, okay, this is going to be a certain kind of set. It's not that hard, is the thing. Is not that hard. And so I think that, you just need that one person to go, this is what we're doing, and everyone kind of comes on board.
Right. So, yeah, Yareli?
No, I just got this idea right now, and probably because you mentioned the children's programming and, how to do things on the set, and it's not that hard. How about we go back to lunch boxes? That kind of idea. that each person on the set has their lunchbox and it gets cleaned out. You know, you find it, there's your food. I mean, I'm thinking COVID moment, right? And you've got your stuff in there and then you bring it back out. I mean, just so that we don't need all of the plates and all of the this and that. It's like, you know, take care of your lunchbox.
Yeah, it's like a bento box or something like
Yes.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've used those on expeditions. It was pretty interesting to
Mm.
reuse the container.
Yeah, you know, I think that one of the things that we have to really educate everybody on is that the bill of goods we were sold on what's convenient actually is very inconvenient. And we're going to have to dial it back to a different time when we actually repurpose things, wash things out,
Right.
and reuse them. And it's an extra couple of steps that we're not used to doing anymore. But we had to be educated on how to be a throwaway society too, because there was a time when you didn't even empty a can of coffee or a box of cigars without repurposing it into into a sewing box or a change jar. And so it happened around the time of the vending machine. When that happened in the mid 20th century, people didn't understand that you can get a hot cup of coffee out of the vending machine, and then they didn't know what to do with this perfectly good cup that you can keep using. We had to be taught to be a throwaway society. They made public service announcements showing how convenient and modern it is to take this perfectly good cup and throw it away. And then they started having trash bins next to the vending machine. So you get your hot cup of coffee, you finish it, and because you're so contemporary and modern, you just throw it away. Well, now we have to unpack that and reteach everybody that that was a load of bull. And it's not serving anyone well.
I agree with that 1,000%. And also, you know, to move us away from false narratives and false solutions, that the public needs to recycle better and things like that have been pushed on us by industry. And that brings me to another question that I'd actually like to offer to Dana. Dana, in the reports that you've worked on with regards to climate, as well as this report about plastics, single-use plastics, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but in what percentage does the plastic industry or petrochemical industry sponsor film and television? And how much decision-making influence or power do they have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't speak to the percentage just because, you know, I'm not an expert on any industry really, but in terms of like sponsorship and circling back to what we were talking about product placement, we were actually surprised to find not a ton of product placement for plastics in our sample. And of course, that's not to say that it doesn't exist. You know, it was present in some cases, like we saw Coca-Cola bottles or Voss water bottles, for example. But then we were also really excited to see the example of the reusable Hydro Flask coffee cups on Superstore, which does appear to be an example of like positive reusable product placement. And could be like an opportunity for more reusable partnerships on TV in the future. So yeah, I think noticing and singling out product placement when you see it is important to kind of counteract the influence of the plastics industry. And I can give a quick example of impact from some of our previous research. Not too long ago, we did a study on depictions of vaping in popular music videos, and we found lots of product placement in particular for this one e-cigarette brand. And then drawing from this research, the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office announced a $1 million penalty against this vape company for marketing its products to youth through music videos. And so, of course, vaping is a relevant example to the issue of plastic pollution, because in both cases, there's an entire industry, both tobacco and plastics, that we're up against. But we know that there's been a whole movement against showing smoking on TV, and we could be at the precipice of like a similar movement to kind of denormalize single-use plastics on television, and then instead, model the kinds of reusable behaviors that we'd all like to see.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead, you.
No, I was just going to say, we've noticed more of that as well. Recently, we've noticed Swell bottles and Lark bottles and Hydro Flask on different popular shows. Go ahead, Kyra.
I mean, the only thing I would say is just that I would love to figure out a way for people to really understand how the tiny infinitesimal fraction of recycling of plastic that actually happens. I mean, I know that if people really understood that there's no such thing as plastic recycling plastic, that I really have to believe that people would use less of it. I think that people are like, well, we'll just recycle it. I mean, I would love to have, a great storyline in a show where someone said, that 0.000% or 4% of plastic actually turns into anything that's reusable. And because I think that they've done such a great job on selling us on what Fran was talking about, like, aren't we modern? Isn't it great? We can just, and we're being responsible by throwing it in the recycling, and understanding that is the big lie. I think they're so brilliant at marketing, and we have to do better. We have to be better at that somehow.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you and agree with you. We have another question for Dana. Dana, how can this research set the stage for change?
Yeah, so our research is kind of exciting because it's the first of its kind to our knowledge. So what we're really trying to do with this report is use it as a baseline, and then you can, in that way, it becomes like a first step towards changing the culture among writers and showrunners on TV shows, something where you can go into a writer's room with concrete facts about the problem of plastic pollution and then offer potential solutions, because at least you have a baseline idea now of how the issue has been depicted on popular TV shows and ways in which Hollywood could do better. So I'm on the research branch at the Norman Lear Center. We also have an outreach branch, Hollywood Health and Society, that connects experts with screenwriters and goes directly into writers' rooms and gives advice and recommendations on how to depict social issues.
Right, wonderful. A quick question though, actually, I'm going to take us over to Fran. How do we find out more about the SAG-AFTRA Green Council? And can you talk a little more about that for us, Fran?
Yes, it's a constellation of activists who all have their own lane of expertise and come together. Most of them are headquartered here, and I think that it's going to really mobilize everybody through the infrastructure of SAG-AFTRA, which is a huge organization with a tremendous amount of staff, just waiting for the right leadership to focus itself on engineering something that's meaningful. And I, as the president, I'm taking the radical step of removing the largest entertainment union in the world from being Switzerland to actually standing up to things that matter, issues that can no longer be ignored. Because as we've been discussing, we and our industry are the great influencers of all time. And if we don't apply that to the greater good, then, what good is it? I, of course, am excited to be working with you and excited to be making the elimination of single-use plastic the first cornerstone of the Green Council effort. And I'm so glad that it's coming at a time when the PPC, has done such a wonderful job of putting together the pieces for this flip the script, which is such an important element to this. And I feel very optimistic about it. And, you know, whoever you think we should bring into this constellation that has their own lane of expertise and you know, is certainly of interest to me. And I'm very accessible at President Drescher at sagaftra.org. So, you know, this is something that I think is going to be really big. I'm going to take it to Washington. I want to do legislation here in California because, as everybody knows, what happens in California then goes the rest of the nation. And it's a big idea, but you know, that's my MO, you know. I want to take us to the next level. I want to take our ability to be influencers and actually have influence.
That's so great, Fran. We want to support you with this. So thank you for taking it on. I'm going to try and fit in a couple more questions for everybody. So let me gear this question towards Yareli and Kyra. Well, this is for all of you actually, but yeah. How do you encourage producers who are often working with a limited budget to provide reusables, or at least the compostable or reusable dinnerware or silverware to the crew and actors on set? I mean, I feel like you kind of already touched on this, Kyra, but.
Yeah, no, it is. It's more expensive, unfortunately, at this point, which sucks.
But ultimately, is it? If
no, ultimately it's not. Ultimately,
right, okay.
It's not. I mean, I think that part of our storytelling would be great if we could connect the dots, as Fran said, with health. You know, how, you know, it's like we never do anything preventatively, you know, in this country, and that's the problem. You know, we wait until, you know, it's already broken. So I think that that's really the thing to say is, you know, let's not wait until this is broken. Let's be part of the solution. But really, it comes from somebody in a powerful position being able to do it. I mean, I really think that I mean, I feel for and everyone will cry poor, and then you'll say, you know, actually, you know, you'll do the research and go, well, actually, this company makes something that's less expensive, and everyone feels better about it. It's like you feed the crew well because they'll be happier to be working. If the crew feels like you're taking care of their planet, their whole, you know, home, you know, my experience is that people have a positive reaction to it. It's not easy, but I think it can be done. But it does come from having a certain amount of power, and you know, unfortunately, that I think that that's just a fact. Somebody,
you know, I want to say something to that also, because you gave me an idea. You know, I mean, why can't a production have regular plates and utensils and glasses? I mean, a restaurant has it. All you need is a dishwasher, and you know, there's one meal a day. It's like, why can't people either be given their own kit and have to wash it out themselves, or you just stack your dirty plates and stuff in a bin and it gets put into the dishwasher and stuff. I mean, why do we have to use disposable anyway? You go to a restaurant, you don't expect to eat with, I mean, unless it's fast food, you don't expect to eat with plastic or anything like that. Why? I mean, I've boycotted for years restaurants that were serving Fiji water. I don't need to pay money for that. And I know that they serve it. And in protest, I always say, is the water, because they always ask, they're always pushing the bottled water, is it in plastic? And I know it's in plastic. And I say, well, I'm sorry, but I'll take the filter tap water. I would have bought the spring water if it was in glass, but the fact that you're selling me plastic, I'm not going to be part of the problem, even though you are.
Mm.
And so you hear it enough times. And now I've noticed that restaurant
Yeah.
is doing glass.
So Fran, just to
Yeah.
jump in on that, you know, we've seen a lot of great examples, but what this really has to do with is reworking the infrastructure that supports what we set up for a production, so that we have people in charge of helping wash things and reuse them. And ultimately it does save money, because you're not just using a bunch of single-use things that then go to landfill or incinerated or end up in our environment. I have lots of other questions, but we're at time, you guys, and the conversations just it went by so quickly. So I would like to thank you all for being part of this conversation, taking time. I know there's a lot more to talk about, and I would like to join everybody who tuned in today for being part of our webinar. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Yareli. Thank you, Kyra. Thank you, Fran. And we look forward to working with you further. And on all of this, it's just the beginning. Obviously, I'm very excited. I'm trying not to act like a total geek about it. But if you want to stay involved with Flip the Script on Plastic, you can sign up for updates on our landing page, which can be found on our website at Flip the Script. It's on the top of the homepage. And please, we'd like to invite everyone also to please save the date for our next webinar, which is on February 16th, where the topic will be Don't Look Down. It's time to wake up to the plastic pollution and climate crisis. And our panelists will include Yvette Arellano, Shilpi Chotre, and Dr. Michael Mann, who Leonardo DiCaprio based his character in Don't Look Up on. He's a climate scientist. And so I'm really looking forward to that conversation coming up on February 16th. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our global coalition. It's free to join us. We welcome everyone, including individuals, businesses, and nonprofits interested in joining our cause for a more just, equitable world free of plastic pollution. We invite you to connect with us on social media to learn more. We will also be sending out a link to a survey, and we'd love to get your feedback on today's webinar. Thank you to everyone for joining us for this today. Thank you to our Plastic Pollution Coalition member groups and partners who shared this webinar with their communities and networks. And we very much look forward to seeing you on our next webinar on February 16th. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. And thank you for tuning in.